Hello again. I hope you're hanging in there. I know it's a long day. If you brought your packet with you, the slides that you're going to be viewing tonight are on page 15. And I just remind you once again, for those of you who weren't with us earlier, beginning on page 39, you're going to find a number of resources that I hope will help you as you try to take this incredible experience that we're all having together back to your parishes. So, obviously from the slide that you see in front of you, in this session we're focusing on the habits and signs of a healthy parish. So to begin, I want to spend a little time defining a term that I've used many times in my first two presentations, culture. So I'm going to take you back now, 12 years ago, to St. Spiridon's, and it's our first Pascha, our first Easter. So the midnight service had just come to a close, and I came out to distribute the red Paschal eggs. Wait a minute. I realized they don't know what I'm about to do. They've never received a red egg before. They were expecting bread. So I stopped with a basket of eggs in front of me and I said, okay, listen up everyone. Tonight when you come forward, instead of me handing you the andidaron, the blessed bread, I'm going to give you a red egg. Now before I could say another word, 15 hands went up. Yes, Daryl. What are you going to give me? I said, I'm going to give you a red egg. Another hand. Yes? Why is it red? Well, I said, hold on a second. Let me tell you what we're going to do here. I'm going to hand you a red egg. Red reminds us of the blood of Christ. Okay? And as you walk up, I'm going to hand you that egg, and then I'm going to smash your egg. What? Now, can you imagine saying to someone, I'm going to smash your egg, and when I smash your egg, I'm going to say, Christ is risen. And then you're going to say, truly he is risen. They'd never heard that exchange before. So I'm like, Christ is risen. Truly he is risen. More hands. When do I say that? So, some more explanations. The fast is over. We're going to break the fast. We're going to eat these eggs. And literally that first Pascha, I had told my parish council president, you're going to hold a barbecue for these 50 people that are showing up. And she's like, why? And I'm like, they don't have anywhere to go. They're probably going to come to the vigil service and then what? I don't know, have pancakes? Like, we're going to make lamb and we're going to show them how we celebrate Pascha. Well, anyway, I'm explaining the egg to them. And I think I got it down. We crack the tomb. Christ comes out, life, on. And I think I have all the questions answered. One more hand goes up. Yes, Katie. What if you're allergic to eggs? So before I can say anything, Daryl, the first person, says, put it in your prayer corner, Katie. Can you imagine that? So much happens in that exchange that I need to review it for you. It speaks a lot about the culture that we had already begun to create in the first several months of St. Spiridon's existence. Notice that there are questions right away. Spiritual ones. Teaching. Application. They didn't know what a Paschal egg was, but they did have prayer corners. And the community is starting to teach one another. Put it in your prayer corner. Now, if you look at this slide, you're going to notice that the culture of the parish is made up of its set of shared ideologies, its philosophies, its values and beliefs, its behaviors. its traditions, its attitudes, and its norms. And of course, we would say, well, culture is influenced, isn't it, by our ethnicity? I'm Greek. I married a Greek girl. She didn't even speak English when she went to grade school. The first question my future mother-in-law asked me was, Milas? And culture is influenced by our social background, our economic status, our political leanings, our education, and certainly by the overall demographic diversity of the community. And that's something that we spoke about in our barriers conversation. But I want you to know something. Culture, which is made up of all those things, is stronger and larger than any one of those things. So, a healthy parish has to know what culture does. How many of you can recall your first sleepover?
I'm a Greek girl. We weren't allowed to have them.
Well,
Come on, right?
you weren't allowed to have one. I can remember my first sleepover. I went over to Gar Kennedy's house. It's not Greek. And I got there, and I ate orange macaroni. I'd never had orange macaroni. And there was a bowl of, I guess it was a salad, but it was just iceberg lettuce. I'd never had an iceberg lettuce salad. And the dressing was in a bottle, and it was white. It had the name Wishbone and Ranch. And when dinner was finished, I got an Oreo cookie. For breakfast, Captain Crunch. And all of this was done in front of the television. So when I got home and my mom asked me, how was your sleepover? All I could talk about was orange macaroni, Captain Crunch, and Wishbone Ranch dressing. It was a very different home from the one that I grew up in. I even thought it smelled funny. I think we underestimate the profound impact that culture has, and especially the culture of our parishes. It has a profound impact on everyone who steps in our doors. To be sure, your parish's culture is a naturally occurring outgrowth of the long-term interpersonal interactions that have occurred over time. Now, that's a classic definition of what organizational culture is. Just as my friend's home was a culture cultivated over time. It's a little bit like a patina that develops. Our parish culture is something that profoundly impacts how we live. Now, how many of you remember from the top of your head, or you can look back in your brochures, my 4 principles of parish health? Maybe you want to try? First one, spiritual. Second one, gospel and life. Third one, community. Fourth one, organizational excellence. Okay, so yesterday we had a new couple that had been in church for a couple of weeks, and I hadn't had a chance to catch them. So yesterday I grabbed them at the end of the service, and I said, do you have 5 minutes to sit down with me before you leave today? Yes, Father. Just come get us in the fellowship hall. So, lest you think that I just wrote this, no, I added this yesterday. So I sit down with Duffy, that's the man's name, and Lori. It's a little confusing, figuring out their names. Duffy gave me a long explanation of how he got the name. And so I said to them, tell me about your experience at St. Spiridon's thus far. This is a summary of what he said. Well, Father Evan, my wife and I for several years have been searching for a home that would address our spiritual needs. Check. Right? That was the first principle. Next, we noticed that in the places we went, we would attend for a while, but nothing changed. My wife recently said, in the few months that we've been here, already her coworkers have said, what's going on, Lori? You've changed a lot in the last couple of months. Check. Third one, we don't have family. We do now. We feel like we're home. And oh, by the way, it seems like things are running rather smoothly around here. Check again. I came home and I was like, honey, I got to tell you what just happened. Because she's been listening to these talks for the last couple of months as I've been rehearsing them. And she goes, all your boxes on culture got checked. I go, I know. Now, look, I'm not dense. I know that most of us inherit a culture. Some, like me, get to be part of forming a culture. Yet it's a mistake to think for even a moment that every priest and every parish leader does not add or subtract from the culture of their parish. And the difference between a healthy community and one that is unhealthy and struggling is that the healthy parish is asking itself again and again, what is the culture of our parish? Now, I told you a story about Pascha a few years later. Now, at this point, we're about 3 years in, and services are getting full. We had a church that fit, comfortably 50. And it got to be a little bit like a circus car. We were cramming in 110, 120. I remember Palm Sunday, we had 220. It was definitely, and we have a fire captain in my parish, and he was like freaking out. We got lit candles everywhere, right? And one exit. And so it's a few years later, and it's Pascha. But now, some of the, and forgive me, I'm not trying to be offensive, the culturally Orthodox had heard about us. We were near 3 universities. And at one of the universities, they have an exchange program with Orthodox from Cyprus. Well, they're PhD students. Yay, Father Gary. And so from time to time, they would visit us, and especially at Pascha. So, you remember Daryl? Daryl is sitting at the back of the church, and he happens to be sitting next to this group of Orthodox Christians from Cyprus. And he got pretty confused. Because as soon as I said Christ is risen, they left. So the next day, we're at the Pascha barbecue. As I said to you, they don't have places to go, so we hold this massive barbecue. And Daryl walks up to me. We had just had agape vespers. We're now eating lamb. And he says, Father, why did all those people leave after we sang Christ is risen for the first time? Well, Daryl, and I tried to explain to him that in many parishes, the Orthodox who visit for this great feast don't stay for the liturgy. And he said, gosh, I didn't know we could leave. Culture. Culture is important. And healthy parishes think about it because they know, and I'm going to switch the slide here, the culture of a parish defines and guides. It does that either overtly or, in the case of Daryl, even subconsciously. Culture determines how the people in the parish live and operate. And so you remember Ted? The bottom line in it. He also calls me Papuli. Papuli, the bottom line in it. We should do another session just on TED stories. They're great. But a healthy parish understands that its culture drives its decisions and actions. And so a healthy parish starts to pay attention to its culture. Now, my good friend, Father Tom, likes to remind me, what does practice make? Permanent. Practice makes permanent, right? So it's perfect practice that makes perfect, but practice makes permanent. So if we do something a certain way, ultimately, that's what we do. And so we know from experience and from study after study on organizational behavior that the culture of the parish determines its overall performance and how it either does or does not live out the Great Commission. So you'll see down here at the bottom, I want you to learn that phrase by heart. Culture eats strategy for lunch. This means that anything we attempt to do will be effective only in as much as the culture allows it. You got it? So if parish culture is so important, what then are the benefits of a healthy parish culture? So here are a few. I went over this with one of my leadership coaches, and I showed him all my slides, and he said, you cannot put that much information on one slide. I had like 40 things listed for the benefits of culture. He said, narrow it down. So that first one is really important. Increases morale, commitment, and teamwork. One of the indicators that if you get a parish health team to come in and study your community and they ask all these questions, there's one indicating answer that will tell them whether or not you've got a future. And that is whether or not people think that your future will be better. It's one question. Do you think your future will be better than your past? In communities that answer that into the supermajority that it will be, the team knows right away we're going to make it. Culture affects the morale, right? Number 2, it decreases waste and conflict. How many of you have unlimited resources? Nobody. In an unhealthy culture, we're constantly burning up our resources, and usually on the wrong thing. But if our culture is right, then we decrease the waste. We decrease the conflict. Obviously, the next one down, it improves decision-making, efficiency, performance, and operation. Those are all great. And I think that this next one here is probably the most important. It maintains values while building a transcendent structure. This is one of the most glorious and dangerous benefits. If the culture's right, we're in business. If the culture's wrong, we're not. You know, we talked about uneven performance, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more if we have the time, but sometimes parishes have these like skyrocket or exponential moments where people will even say, gosh, 8 years ago we were just screaming off the launch pad, and we seem to level out, and then we just we're just in this sort of slow drift downward, right? Well, if the culture's not constantly rehabilitated, right, then that transcendent factor can't happen, okay? Now, we're not looking for 6 years of solid growth, right? We're looking for generational growth. Do you remember that hymn from the Lamentation? Every generation. I love that one, right? And I think of this culture reality when we sing that hymn. Now that sounds like a great list, right? Well, the thing of it is, when you are healthy, I'm beating a dead horse, you develop the right culture. It's not like you try and increase morale or decision-making or efficiency or the maintenance of your values. Once again, if the culture is in place, it's a byproduct. So when I left for St. Spiridon to begin my ministry there, I decided before I got to St. Spiridon that I was going to interview several accomplished parish priests. I also had an abbess on my list, a couple of mentors, a professor from business school, and some from the seminary. And I asked them the same set of questions. I said, explain to me what you would do if you showed up in a place to start a church. Now, I kept all those interviews, and I've looked back over them. And when I review what they said to me, I realized that all of them were talking about culture. They intuitively knew and understood the benefits of it. So a last word on culture. Well, maybe 2 more words. You know, in a parish, the culture guides the priest, it guides the parish council, it guides the ministry leaders, the parishioners, and the quality of their interactions, not only with one another, but with the outside world. Thus, when you get it right, you're in business. When you don't attend to the culture, you busy yourself with lists and rules, do's and don'ts. It's tedious, and it doesn't work. When in reality, the culture determines the quality of all that we're doing. So if we are healthy, then we are concerned whether the culture is the right culture. Here's my last word on culture. Now, the habit of a healthy parish, as I've already kind of stated, is to be in this constant state of examination and reflection. And as I told you, it is my habit to constantly meet with guests. Guests will tell you incredible things if you'll just sit down with them and ask them, what do you think? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? I love asking priests at visit because they always have a great perspective. I kind of hound them. What did you think? What did you think of the music? What did you think of how we did, the sermon? Or what do you think of the grounds? Or, whatever those questions might be. And then I meet periodically with parishioners. And we sit down, we kind of have this long town hall, and I just say, tell me what you think. And so we've got this very clear vision and set of mission statements. We go through them, and I'm saying, just react. Just tell me, where are we hitting it? Where are we missing it? Well, so we're in this constant reflection about our culture and trying to improve it. And a healthy parish knows how important and slow movements around culture need to be. Thus, it's a massive mistake to think culture is easily changed. I'm going to say something about that in a moment here. In fact, we must recognize that the culture of our parishes is deeply ingrained in people. And it takes a great deal of time, conversation, careful thinking to see what they mean by culture, to understand our culture, and to recognize its strengths and its weaknesses. Leaders and those who work with them to change culture can easily set unreal expectations that are impossible to realize. So there must be, in our own self-understanding as we embark on this work, an understanding of the time and the leadership attention that it is going to take to properly address the question of parish culture. I'm going to give you some facts now. So when I started studying culture, one of the things that I came across was a study on how long does it take to transition a culture from one set of ideas, philosophies, and values to another. Does anybody have a guess how many years it takes? 7. Nice number. 7. Now, can anybody guess what percentage of communities can make the transition? 7. 7 years, and only 7% of the communities that attempt to change the culture actually pull it off. Now, remember one of our barriers, autocracy. Well, a sign of an autocratic parish is something I labeled earlier as a daddy parish. Now, a daddy parish is not necessarily a bad thing. There are a lot of really good daddy parishes in the archdiocese, and they function well. And the problem is that a daddy-run parish relies on a central, charismatic leader who guides, directs, and is adored by most of the people he leads. And what that leads to is an unempowered and disengaged laity. And over time, it's unsustainable. And that's because the success of the daddy parish lasts only as long as the leader does. So I'm reading this research. I'm reading about daddy parishes, and I'm reading about chapel parishes, and daddy chapel hybrids, and empowered, engaged parishes. And then it says, a common flaw of a startup is that it becomes a daddy parish. That's to say that the naturally occurring phenomenon in any startup, but keep in mind we can expand that definition to include a startup also includes any major transition. So like you build a new church, you start a fundraising campaign, you get a new board or a new parish council, a parish priest. So it's a naturally occurring phenomenon. But whenever something big happens, that specter of daddy and chapel is there. Well, I realized at the end of my 5th year that I was a daddy. If I said, we're doing this, if I literally had said, look, on Pascha, you bring ball bearings to church. And after I say Christ is risen, you take the ball bearings out of your right pocket and put them. I was the only parish priest they'd ever met. So whatever I said was orthodoxy. Okay? They had literally not been in other Orthodox churches. I was telling a group of people before that we take an annual pilgrimage to the monastery, and I often take catechumens with me. And we call it the Kiss This tour. So we'll walk in, and they will literally go, kiss that? Yeah, kiss that. And then, they bring the relics out. What do we do? Kiss it. Just keep kissing, right? And there's this big guy who used to play for the Kansas City Royals. He's standing next to me, John. And he's like all stoic. And they bring out the relics, the bones, right? And he looks at me and he goes, "Kiss this?" So if I said it, they did it. If there was a meeting and I showed up, people came. If I didn't show up, no one else did. And so it was that time that I realized through self-reflection and this new learning on the art of leadership, which we are about to get into, along with further study on the meaning of parish health and culture as well as organizational behavior, that we were a daddy parish. And that I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here, and that if I didn't start the transition, we were going to be in trouble. So I sat back and I crafted a series of carefully thought out talks. I met with my parish leadership, sermons, assembly meetings. And I explained to the people that we are going to change the culture of St. Spiridon's. We're going to move away from this daddy culture and we're going to go to this empowered ministry model. Now, I talk about this empowered ministry model in other talks, so I'm not going to get into that right now. But I'm now in my 12th year. So how many years have I been working on culture shift? 7. And what I found is that the resistance is not only in me, but it's also in the parish. I'll give you an example. Recently, we established a rehearsal space for our choir. Okay? That rehearsal space is in the education building. And according to our organizational structure, the educational building is overseen by the parish council. The church is overseen by the parish priest. They wanted to change the space. The parish council said no. Who did they come to? Daddy. And I had to say to them, you don't come to me. This isn't a daddy parish. This is an empowered ministry model. You go to the parish council and you discuss it with them. So we've had some struggles in shifting the culture, and we're intentional about it. But we also had successes as well. One Sunday I arrived, and in the parish bulletin, there were 3 new ministries announced. I didn't know that there were these 3 new ministries. Is that a problem? Not really. So the astute leader often must ask themselves, what in my parish culture can be leveraged? This leads them to focus on the strengths of their parish culture, and over time, back to our earlier example, prune the weaknesses. The astute leader says, how can I get the people I need to help in this process of change? You get the right people on the bus in the right seats. Okay? So be aware, though, and this is something that I constantly fall into, the desire to alter things too quickly will raise the resistance to change to an unbearable level. It'll result in things boiling over. You know, I had a secretary from Romania, Cifaci. Does anybody know Cifaci? It means Cifaci, how are you? Well, I told her, you got to teach me one phrase. Where is your head? She said, why? Just teach me the phrase. Undi ci capo. Okay, undi ci capo. So Alina would come into my office and she would leave stuff. So I would buzz her, undi ci capo. She'd run back in. She'd leave. Buzz her again, undi ci capo. She'd come back in. Well, one day she said, you know, Father Evan, the world moves too slow for you. But it's moving too fast for the rest of us. You got to slow it down. You know, as we look at parish culture, we can't move too quick. We can't get easily frustrated over the entrenched cultural baggage in our parish. But at the same time, we can't ignore it. We can't act like it's not there. We can't leave well enough alone. If we do that, we're in trouble. Now, I live in Fort Collins, and not far from me in Windsor is one of Kodak's largest shuttered plants. You remember Kodak? Okay. Now, for decades, one of the most profitable companies in the U.S., they had a vice grip on the world of photography. Do you know what they did in 1975? They invented digital photography. Did you know that? Kodak invented digital photography. What did they do with this altering technology? Nothing. They couldn't even see the revolutionary nature of their own discovery because of their culture. You know, if you sort of do the autopsy, what people from Kodak will tell you is that the culture of innovation and change had left the building. They were into preservation. They were no longer tied to innovation. And so Kodak doesn't really exist anymore, does it? My children don't even know what it is. Obviously, Jesus did not ignore culture. Instead, he went on an intensive 3-year study to foster a culture constantly with his disciples. You know, he didn't give them a manual or a list of things to do when he left. And perhaps a good word from our own tradition for this is phronima, right? He established the right mindset, the right outlook. When we got married, oh gosh, my wife's we won't let her listen to this. My wife grew up in a home that, financially wasn't, able to do it all. So she worked. She worked her way through high school, college. She got herself through university. She worked a lot. So she never learned how to just make spaghetti. Anything. She was working all the time. So she knew that one of my favorite things is avolemino. Chicken, rice, lemon. Not hard, right? So she made avolemino. Father Tom and Presbyter Pat, you came over. Do you remember that? It was mud. It was really bad. So we called my mom. We said, Mom, how do you make avolemino? She said, well, get a large pot. And fill it with some water and stick a chicken in it. And then put some seasoning in, boil it for a while, and add the rice. Right? That was her recipe. There wasn't anything written down. So how did she learn to make avolemino? Well, the next time that we were in Colorado, she said, Ma, will you teach me how to make avolemino? And she watched her make it. She did it with her. That's what Jesus did. He modeled a culture, and the disciples picked it up. Okay. At this point in my talk about the signs and practices of healthy parishes, I'd like to shift from this talk about culture and focus on leadership.
Can we ask a question about culture?
Yeah, please, Father.
In my experience, I think you have parishes that have, I don't think it's so black and white. So
What do you mean?
I mean that there's some healthy culture.
Yeah, and then
there's some dysfunctional
right.
culture kind of mixed in. So does that still take that 7 years? Does that still take that mindset change, or can you begin to work on the positive and ignore the negative?
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to address, Father Tom. I appreciate that question. So he's asking, what if there's some really good things and then there's some things that are negative in the culture? Is it still 7 years? Yes. Any entrenched cultural element of your community that's unhealthy will take 7 years. So if you say 9 of the 10 things we do are healthy, 1 thing's bad, it's 7 years and only 7% of the time where you dislodge that unhealthy behavior. Okay? Now, obviously, if you've got 9 things going well and only one area of something that's disfigured, well, volto origini. Right? Throw on the oregano. Right? It's done. You're doing pretty good, right? Most of us are not in that situation. So what's that hybrid mix? Is it 50-50? That's why I talk about leveraging. Looking, what are the strengths? Apply the strengths to the weaknesses and prune. Right? But be aware that, this is a long process. It takes a lot of conversation. People are going to freak out. Okay? They are going to freak out if you talk about culture. And then you have to define what culture is. That's why I did it. Because if I say culture in most parishes, they say, well, he's talking about Greek. And I'm not talking about Greek. Not at all. Culture is a bigger word. Okay? So great question, Father Tom. Thank you. I think we're going to have some time at the end of tonight for some additional question and answer, both from the first presentation and this one. So I'm going to move on then. So leadership. Leadership and health are completely entangled and linked. Now, my parish is not filled with graduates of Holy Cross. We don't have professors of organizational behavior. The best and the brightest from Harvard and Apple don't hang out in our parish hall. But God provides. You remember Mr. Magoo? That third barrier, blind spotting. Well, the transformation here occurs when we realize our blind spots and we look for help and try to learn something new. Probably the biggest driver, and if anything you remember from this talk, remember this. The biggest driver in transformation is the relentless pursuit of developed leadership. Did you hear that? Know Jesus, then what? Following me? The biggest driver in transformation is the relentless pursuit to develop leadership. Now, a healthy parish realizes that its overall health requires developed leadership. Not just leaders, developed leaders. I'm using that word on purpose because I want to point out to you that leadership is learned. You know, I think too many of us have a misunderstanding about leadership. And so I want to develop a definition of leadership for you. You know, you learn to do these things. So first, you'll see that bullet. A developed leader understands the importance of establishing the general character, direction, attitude, and tone of the parish. And because of this, a leader makes all the difference. The leader is the agent of change. And what often happens is that leaders make the mistake of managing. If you're managing, then you're in the culture, you're not leading the culture. It means you're already engrossed. You're not a developed leader if you're absorbed in the culture. Second, a developed leader understands that an essential element of their work is guiding the cascading stream that comes after setting the tone. It's not enough to say we're going to the moon. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more, and in other talks I talk about it a lot. But there's this sort of cascading reality. You know, you set the vision, you set the mission, right? You set your long-range strategic goals. Those are 3 to 5. These are not white papers that you just sort of put in a drawer. You set your SMART goals that are specific and measurable, actionable, realistic in time, and they're 1 year. And third, a leader develops a plan of execution. He sort of establishes the cadence and rhythm of the work of the parish. So in my parish, we have a cadence chart for how the work flows. We've established the structure and the organization. We have our roles, our responsibilities, the org chart. People know who they speak to, where they get their answers. And when somebody comes out, like my choir director did, I point them back to the structure. A leader develops the tools and the processes needed to do the work of the parish. Now, all the while, you know, the leader understands their own strengths and weaknesses. Now, how many of us went to seminary and learned these things? 1. He's joking, right, Father Daniel? I had a parish ed admin course. And you know what the priest told me? Nothing. He didn't know how to run a parish. We lost the instructor like a week before the class started, so they just got a parish priest, and he didn't know what to tell us. So, you know, if you're in that boat like I was, I didn't know what to do. What you start to do is you build and attract the cadre of people that can help you get there. You start to socialize the idea that we need to develop leadership, and I don't know how. And I need your help. Help me build this congruency of ownership, of vision and mission. And of course, you don't just plant the seed and leave it. It takes constant attention. You water, you till, you weed, you fertilize. You don't just walk away. So I'm developing as a leader. I just said to you that a healthy parish understands the importance of developing its leadership. And so it invests in the development at every level. So we do leadership courses where if you're a ministry lead, the expectation is that you'll have a co-lead, you'll attend the leadership course, and you'll learn how to basically hand off your ministry. Okay? And I said to you earlier that if 80% of our problems come from that first bearer imbalance, 80% of our challenges arise from not having developed leaders. No one's born a leader. It takes work. It's learned and developed. Now, I admit, some people have a naturally occurring skill, but that will only take you so far. And when I got to St. Spiridon's, I thought I was a developed leader. And I was totally wrong. So I'd caution you here. Examine your hearts and listen carefully. Because before you attempt to increase the health of your parish, you have to have a metania. You have to have a change of mind about who you are and what you're doing. It's interesting that before inviting the world to join him on the path to the cross, Jesus' first public word was repent. And so I have to know this over and over, that I can't make the journey of transformation in my current state of mind. So several years into my time at St. Spiridon, a former parishioner of mine had moved away. And they wrote to me and they said, Father, I just wanted to thank you for the many ways that you served me and my family while I was at the parish. They had moved on. They were in a different state. And in their letter, they looked back fondly and with specific details listed the things that I had done as their leader. Instead of being wrapped up nostalgically in what they said, I noticed several attributes that they lauded, but I needed to change. I saw in their letter a whole host of things that were disfigured. It was an interesting snapshot, if you will, into my past and who I was now. How many of you have ever done the exercise of writing your future self a letter? It's powerful, right? But this was in the reverse. They were writing a letter from my past. I said to you earlier, I am certain that 5 years from now, I will regret some of the things I did today. And I tell my wife all the time, I love you more today, but not as much as I will tomorrow. Isn't that true? Right? So that's why I'm excited that you're here. Because developing as a leader requires all of us to rethink who we are. And to consider, I was talking with Father Jerry earlier, we're on a hero's journey. I want to feel that, I want to wake up in the morning and go after something. As part of that journey, you realize what's possible. That we can reclaim the Great Commission. Remember that statistic of we're down 24.5%? I'm tired of this statistic. I want to see it the other way. But this requires the development of leadership. So if that's true, then if you're in this room, we don't have another group. Okay? Some of you are like, I came here because my parish priest told me I had to. Right? I don't care. I don't have anybody else. Who do we got? Right? This is it. This is our crack team. This is our Delta Force. Well, you tell me, do we have anybody else? You got another group coming in next week? Better group? This is it. You're it. All right. We can do it. I think we can. If you can do it in Loveland, I didn't know what I was doing. You can learn the art of leadership. It's the sign of health. And it's fun. You're going to strive in this process for self-awareness. You kind of become self-detached, like I did in that letter. And you start evaluating your thoughts and your actions objectively. It's not as if we don't know this skill. We have confession, for Pete's sake. Right? It's the same thing. So one church growth expert, have any of you read the book Canoeing the Mountains? A few of you. It'd blow your mind, right? His name's Todd Bolsinger. He's out in California. Well, here in California. We're in California. I woke up this morning and it was minus 14. It was cold. Well, Todd Bossinger writes this about leadership. He says, the challenge in front of leaders is the long tutorial of trial and error, of observing and interpreting and experimenting. It requires us to be changed, now listen to this, and attentive to our own resistance to change. Personally, it requires me to embody the transformation needed and then to invite others to join me in it. Do you know that hearts speak to hearts? Do you know that? Like, when a mother is breastfeeding her baby, the mother's heart and the baby's heart sync. Right? Do you know that? Your heart syncs with your pet dog. Your heart syncs with your best friend. And when a new friend comes in the room, if you're synced, they'll sync with you. Isn't that crazy? It's great science. It's totally theologically correct. Todd Bossinger is saying, look, if the heart of the leader isn't synced, then as the people come into the room, they know it. Remember my coach said, I got to grab you in your gut. So if as leaders we realize, and I think we all have to raise our hands and say we're not developed. I am not a developed leader. It's like a self-help group. Hi, my name is Wilder Evan. I'm not a developed leader. Then we seek out help, right? Jesus sent out his disciples 2 by 2. And I got leadership coaches. I talked with mentors and my spiritual father. I listened to podcasts. I read books. And to be honest, I was completely and totally overwhelmed. But just like any new thing, slowly but surely, bit by bit, I've gotten a little bit better. Another coach of mine said, hey, Father Evan, developing as a leader is like eating a salami. How many of you have eaten a salami in one sitting? You slice it thin, right? You eat one little bit. So you bite off the steps to slowly become that developed leader. Now, I think it's important to consider the attributes of developed leaders. Now, I just listened to this fascinating podcast about those 3 saints. And, one of the great things about these 3 saints is that they were literally the best and brightest in the world. Right? These were the Einsteins of their day, and they happened to be in the church. And they faced a crisis of leadership. The church had transitioned, right? From being something that wasn't legal to now legal, to a position where bishops would lose their lives to now everybody was seeking the office, and the talent level dropped. And so they started to talk about leadership. Now, when you start to look at a developed leader, you're going to see at the top there that they take appropriate risks. They are familiar with the rhythm of trial and error, right? Another aspect, and this is a big one that I struggle with. The biggest hallmark of a great leader is that they think. And then the next greatest attribute is that they think. And then after that is that they think. And then they think some more. And they reflect before they act. Prior to developing as a leader, I would walk into meetings and just go with the flow. Now, before meetings, I ask my ministry leaders, send me the agenda a week in advance so I can think and pray over it. A developed leader has internalized their learnings. They're not acting. Remember the heart? The concepts have become a part of who they are as a Christian. St. Paul put it this way, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. He had become a developed leader. So who did he become like? Christ. Developed leaders trust others, and they listen carefully. Now, it's obvious that trusting people doesn't mean you shirk your role. And that listening to healthy criticism doesn't mean you are weak or a doormat. But we can easily forget the importance of both of these. Developed leaders are nimble. And so what that means is they move gracefully and quickly to the challenges and opportunities that come their way. I just watched a documentary on one of the World War II's Medal of Honor recipients. And the documentary showed how he adjusted to what he met in the field. They're humble. They accept peacefully and truthfully their mistakes, and they learn from them. They're flexible. They adapt to the changing world appropriately. And lastly, they have courage and character, but most of all, they have integrity. You know, I always struggled with the definition of integrity. So I went and I kept looking, and I wrote this definition. Integrity means you know the right from the wrong, but that's not enough. It means that you then act for the right despite the risk it poses to yourself. So you know right from wrong, and then you will do what's right even though it poses a risk to yourself. And the last part of it is that you then teach others to do the same. We're almost done here. I have one more slide about the role of a developed leader. It's a specific slide on what does developed leadership mean vis-a-vis parish health. We've talked a little bit about this. And I think a great metaphor for understanding the role of a developed leader is that of the Good Shepherd. You know, in this parable, Jesus illustrates several attributes of the Good Shepherd. So what does he say? He says the Good Shepherd leads the sheep to good pasture. Health. Right? How does a sheep get healthy? You go to a good pasture. He protects the sheep from the wolves. He removes the barriers. He knows the sheep by name and they know him. Culture. He guides them safely back into the fold. Role. We have made the same case here in these three presentations. A developed leader understands that the health of the parish is their first priority. They know that they must protect the parish from the things that are harmful and be willing to give up their life to do so. They assess where they are and begin the process of asking, why are we here? What's our true purpose? And they lead the learning and development. First for themselves, then others. I was on a flight this morning. If we experience a sudden drop in air pressure, you put your mask on, right? Then you assist the person next to you. And the developed leader guides the parish to good health and culture. You know, a good shepherd can envision what the healthy culture is. And then they lead to it. Because ultimately the transformation for us into a missionally minded community, and that doesn't mean it stops for a young parish like mine, requires both the body and each of us personally to examine our resistance, overcome it, and then embody the change. And so this is the last slide, and then I'm going to ask Tomaida to come up. This is a little bit of commentary on systematic development, and I'm refreshed by what is happening in the Metropolis of San Francisco, because I think it can be argued that unhealthy parishes has for a long time, for a long period, sustained unhealthy practices, and the result of that is because the leadership of the organization has stumbled. And so, although you're in the room, we also have to point the finger at ourselves. You know, we have to take ownership here. That's the leader's role. In a general sense, we recognize that the reality that our parish priests and parish leaders are overburdened or do not lack proper support and training can't be an excuse. Because saying this acknowledges that our change as leaders and eventually as communities will require a larger paradigm shift. It's not okay. You know, sometimes I think, laugh with me, don't get upset, that the Archdiocese is almost like a series of unaffiliated and independent diners. You go into one and the service is great, you get a good meal, and the price was right. And the next place steals your wallet, you get food poisoning, and the bathroom's dirty. You know? And so within the structure of our parishes, we also have to look to our metropolises and to our archdioceses. And we have to say, we need systemic change. But I'm telling you right now, we can't wait for it. Can we? You want to wait? Instead, I think from the ground up and with a bishop who is clearly in support, you've got to begin now, as best we can. And so you are the heroes. We look for you as leaders to embark on this transformation. We encourage you to do the same in your communities. And doing this certainly requires us to understand that our role as leaders is to lead our parishes in learning. Learning what the Great Commission truly means. Okay? Now, I think if you look at your surveys and the responses that you made, you'll see in question 31 that you clearly asked for this. It's what you guys want. You want coaching, mentorship, leadership classes. You want to develop. And so I think you're on the right footing, Your Eminence, and I appreciate that.